Okay.
All right. So 336 Bitcoins. That's a lot of money, I think.
Yeah, about a little over 3.1 million. Pretty interesting, and I mean, nothing. To me, it's almost not newsworthy when cryptocurrency gets stolen because it happens so often. But what I thought was interesting there were a couple things I thought were interesting about this. First of all, that it got stolen from a crypto exchange. Not great. They say that it didn't affect any of the users, which I think is interesting, but that just to me says what like they must have covered the cost themselves. The other thing I think was interesting about this is that they are trying to prevent the thief or thieves from reselling the crypto on other exchanges. My first thought was good luck, but then I just thought that was interesting because I've never seen that claim before.
Yeah, it kind of shows what's wrong with Bitcoin. It's not really anonymous. There aren't that many exchanges. If it was like Monero or something, I don't think you'd ever be able to stop it. Or Zcash. Anyway.
Yeah. So they use malware to do it.
Of course.
As far as they know anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yep. So Irvin, there was a couple of people I had ones about Data Viper, so I accumulated them all here. So let's hear about this Data Viper.
So Data Viper was a company that did things like threat intelligence platform designed reading their quote, to provide organizations, investigators, and law enforcement with access to the largest collection of private hacker channels, paste, forums, and breached databases on the market. Unfortunately, they were the target, and they got their stuff put out on the dark web. So they
but most of this stuff was really old.
Yeah. But the whole big story is they got too close to their prey, and the prey struck back.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for this to happen to one of these indexers. I mean, we knew it was coming.
Yeah. So they just got too close. They just got too close, and they struck back.
Yeah, I guess. But in a way, they were reselling stolen data anyway. It's you could argue about the legality and even the ethics of what they're doing.
Yes,
and that's kind of the big question: is the legality and the ethics of how you're reselling breached data?
Well, the idea is you only tell the company about what their data was stolen. But anyway, it's strange product you're selling there. Of course, I'm in the same position, especially in the first days of teaching the hacking class. All my tools were from criminals. All my techniques were from criminals. So, it's kind of an issue in security, and we're kind of all taking more or less stolen data. That's why Bill Gates used to get mad at Linux. Linux is just organized software piracy. All the drivers are just repurposed Windows drivers, which they pretty much are. Mm-hmm. They're pretty much. That's why I don't know if you remember, Ubuntu used to make you have to check a box agreeing to take the legal risk to install most of the software because it was all technically pirated.
Yeah.
Well, ethics in the internet get pretty disturbing. And here's the one that got a lot of news.
Yeah, today.
Except who the heck would use a Microsoft DNS server?
That's a good question. And that's probably why it went undetected for 17 years.
Yeah.
And so there's a flaw in the way that Microsoft servers handle DNS. Yeah. And this article goes into great detail of, that one, the X.
It's like the ping of death. You just have to make the request longer than 64K, right?
Exactly. There's an integer overflow error that leads to a heap overflow that allows for remote code execution over a DNS request.
Yeah.
It is awesome. And like you said, Sam, why would anyone use a DNS Microsoft DNS server? Which very few people do.
I think it might tend to happen if you set up a Windows domain, like in the default way.
But even in the Windows domain, you're still using Active Directory usually, not DNS.
I had to put DNS and DHCP on a
It
Windows
installs
server.
with it.
We're
It installs
forwarding
with
on
it.
Active
Yeah.
Directory.
But you're definitely not going to find a lot of Windows DNS servers open to the wild on the internet. At least that's not my experience. So the reason why I wanted to show this is because it goes into detail of how it works.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it's
Is it something we could make a fun project out of? Do we have like proof of concept code we can just use?
no proof of concept code yet.
Okay.
However, it doesn't
I don't know. This looks like enough information.
Yeah, there's enough information that we could definitely do something with it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
The problem is that it's non-trivial. So you would have to do a lot of debugging and remote. Okay. I mean, all of these remote exploits take a lot of skill and a lot of time, and you're never sure that one version of Windows is gonna work and another version won't and stuff like that. So
yeah, that's cool though. It's nice to see the details of it. All right, and so everyone's getting mad about TikTok now, because TikTok supposedly copies some data out of the clipboard, and now everyone's trying to freak out and say that maybe the Chinese government is stealing all your passwords if you use TikTok or something. There doesn't seem to be any actual proof of that, but Amazon briefly and Wells Fargo seriously said you can't put TikTok on the company-owned devices that you use for official company transactions. So I don't know if there's any actual fire here, but people are getting all upset.
They've
Anyway.
been talking about TikTok for a while.
What's that?
TikTok has been talked about for a while as being a tool of the Chinese, and then when iOS started doing the clipboard thing, that brought it back.
Well, TikTok is doing nothing that Facebook and all these other companies have been doing for years. The only issue is that it's a Chinese company, and so I guess the question is, we can be reasonably sure that the U.S. government is not using Google or Apple to spy on people. Otherwise, the U.S. government would not be trying to sue Apple to put backdoors on their devices.
But the NSA totally is. That's what's so.
Yes. Well, they are doing what they can. They, as far as I can tell, the NSA kind of works aside from the companies. They
hacked them. They treated them as adversaries.
Right. But they're not like in leagues with them, which is I think what the fear is that the Chinese government might be more or less connected with TikTok, and then.
Well, if they use NSLs, they can just force the company to hand it over, and clearly the Chinese government can force any Chinese company to just hand it over. I think that's not an unreasonable fear.
I think it's, I think a couple of things. Like I agree with those points, but also, it's funny how the zeitgeist works, because they aren't making similar proclamations about apps like WhatsApp and WeChat, which I would be more concerned about those. And I saw something from Alex Stamos actually recently saying something along those lines. I think he mentioned WeChat, if I remember correctly, because as if you've ever been to China, you need it to do anything, and people are on it all over the world. And one thing that was interesting I noticed last time that we were there was that it added a feature where you could log in to WeChat with your Facebook account. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty crazy. I mean,
they block Facebook, don't they?
Huh?
Don't they block Facebook there?
Well, not for Americans, apparently.
Right.
But I was also using a Google Fi phone, which doesn't block anything, because they just assume that all foreigners are, no Chinese person that they want to firewall off is going to be using a foreign cell phone.
Yeah, well, the Chinese firewall is very, very annoying. I know that. But the point is, this is trying not to use Chinese chips. Trying not to use Chinese apps and Chinese chips is kind of pointless.
I mean, I think the main takeaway from this is that nothing you ever do online or on any telecommunications device, you could just never assume that it's fully private.
Well, and also, I suppose if you're handling government or military data, you shouldn't have Kaspersky antivirus, and you probably shouldn't have any Chinese social network apps either. That much I agree with.
Yeah, yeah.
But for normal consumers, I think I don't see increased risk here worth worrying about. Anyway, but a lot of people are getting upset about it. So this looks like more hardware supply chain stuff. Good. This is yours, right, Irvin?
It is not.
Oh.
That's me. That's me.
Okay.
So yeah, so this is another one of those stories that's it's been going on for a long time, but they're ongoing. This article specifically relates to an ongoing study about that, and the findings, which are pretty amazing. There you get counterfeit chips all the time, counterfeit sensors, etc., because it's just a great way for these manufacturers to make money, and it's happened with some pretty high profile tech. In fact, one of the linked articles from this one, at least what came up for me, was a story from last year where somebody got caught using these counterfeit chips and selling these counterfeit chips for use in U.S. military gear. So
yeah.
It can be pretty serious. It can be minor. I think a lot of it goes completely undetected. But a lot of the time, they're just not as good, and they might not integrate as seamlessly with the products that they're purchased for. And I thought one of the most interesting things about this article was something that becomes an issue for us a lot of the time in software and security and education, where one of the issues with why these proliferate the U.S. market so badly is that Customs and Border Patrol doesn't really have much of a motivation to catch and root out these shipments of counterfeit silicon, because their busts are measured for either the number of shipments that they seize or the dollar amounts of the shipments that they seize. So that doesn't necessarily translate to maybe you ordered like 500,000 chips that cost like 2 cents a piece. It's not really a great bust for them, and so they just they don't investigate this stuff, but it can have pretty drastic consequences once it gets integrated into the products and sent to market.
Yeah, I know this is why there was an article years ago where they said Cisco, like 80 or 90% of all the tech support on Cisco routers is because they are knockoff routers with knockoff chips. They're not genuine products, which is why they're broken.
Yeah.
That's a huge issue. And it happened to us. We bought some stuff for the hacking lab years ago, and one of them was seriously fake, one of the RAM chips or something. If you buy electronics, you often get fake chips. Anyway.
Fake news, fake chips.
Yep. And so
sometimes you'll buy chips, and you can rub some isopropyl alcohol on top, and then the paint will come off, and you can see what the original chip was.
Yep. And so somebody's got an online sandbox.
So this is a short article on there's malware who now detects if it's running in a sandbox.
Yeah.
Any run sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
And if it detects that it's running in that, it will not run. It'll stop. So making it a little harder for researchers to analyze.
Oh yeah, makes sense. They detect virtual machines. I know Android malware detects. I think I'm getting an echo. One of you folks must have your speakers on in a strange way. Anyway, Yeah, Android malware detects if it's in an emulator too. I'm still getting an echo from somebody. Anyway.
I will mute mine, but I'm using headphones, so it's very unlikely to be me.
Anyway.
I had myself on mute.
Yeah.
Oh, now it got much worse. And now it stopped. Okay. Anyway. So we got Python malware. I'm not aware of any Python malware.
It is on the rise, apparently, which is good for the attackers, I suppose. It's time to move on from assembly. And what they're doing, and the funny thing is that I was using this to create, I'm not going to say malware, because I wasn't making malware, but I was making software to do cybersecurity. And I was using these same techniques because the software that you use to defend computers is often the same type of software that is used to attack computers.
Yeah.
In terms of just logistics and how it operates. And so right. So Python is on the rise. Java, people are writing malware in Java. I feel bad for those people. But
I totally made malware this way, and everybody laughed at me saying, that malware is crap. You wrote that in Python. That's no use.
Yeah, no, but Python is absolutely on the rise. So is Java and JavaScript, unfortunately. C# seems to be steady. PHP seems to be on the decline. C++ is kind of steady throughout time.
Yeah.
And so, so there's a lot of malware being made for Python. And the way that they're doing it is instead of like sending over like a Py file, then hoping the person has the runtime, they're using something called PyInstaller, which is something I've used myself to create native executables. And this works for like Windows, Linux, Mac OS that will contain the Python file, the compiled Python file, as well as a runtime environment in a single executable file, which runs. And then what you can also do is once you have that running, you can send Python through the eval statement. So even though the malware itself might not contain malicious code and get past stuff, if you have that eval statement somewhere in there, you can then pass it, or it can connect to a server, download malicious code, and then run that through the PyInstaller remotely, essentially.
Yes, you create basically remote code execution in vulnerability and run. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, you can certainly do all that. Just normally people think it's like too big and obvious compared to stuff written in C or something, but I guess it's out there.
I think there's a tool mentioned in this where you can bring it down because that is the initial comment about running Python.
Yeah. Well, people put malware in like Word documents and stuff, and that's similarly like sleazy. So. Yeah.
I mean, people have been writing malware in VB script for forever. So I mean,
yeah, I guess it makes sense. It doesn't really matter how big it is for most cases. So anyway, now they got a new technology for quantum computing based on diamonds. So they claim they've made, I think, 128 qubit processor out of this. So we will see. This is, of course, the big problem. Quantum computing requires everything to be made only a couple of millikelvins above absolute zero and otherwise ridiculously expensive. And it's not going to really be worth anything until it runs at room temperature on something you can mass produce like silicon. And maybe these diamonds are going to be the thing. So they made a 128 qubit system, but they haven't yet figured out a way to make this stuff in quantity, in bulk, but they're able to make it at all. And that's progress. So, maybe quantum computers are on the way. There's a whole lot of dirt skipped here though. Like one of the huge problems with all quantum computers is they have far too much noise. And, but it's not going to happen this decade, but someday we'll have quantum computers that actually work, and they will have a lot of consequences, primarily for encryption, but a lot of other things will happen, no doubt, too. Anyway, and it'll be in the CTF tomorrow. I added a quantum computing project to it. So anyway. And so Trump decided not to kick out all the foreign students. He's been doing a lot of this backsliding and canceling stuff, which is the sign of a real collapse, I think, in a guy like him. Anyway.
You're muted, Liz.
Liz?
Thank you.
Yeah.
One thing that I was talking about this with a couple people, and their theory was there was no way they could win, at this, especially because of the powerhouse of opposition that was coming at them. But also, you know, my thinking was more in line with the snarky Register headline, sub-headline there, talking about, you know, how amusingly enough, you don't really want to set off a huge brain drain and hemorrhage of cash from all of these colleges and universities. That was my first thought when they announced it, that it talk about shooting yourself in the foot, you know, which we are big fans of doing right now as a nation, apparently. So it's good this was at least some great news that they've you know, reversed the course on that plan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Republican Party has always been anti-science and anti-education and sort of suspicious of intellectuals. And Trump especially, because authoritarians always try to tramp the individuals down first, because they're always the ones that like tend to think and give you trouble. But
yeah, he was ranting last week about how schools should lose their tax exempt status and stuff. And I'm like, really? Because they're indoctrination centers, but mega churches are okay.
Well, it is incredible to me. I never would have believed that we'd have the president just trying to pretend there is no coronavirus and force everyone to just pretend there's no virus and go to work completely normal. And that's his plan. And he can't believe it's not going to work. And it looks like 30% of Americans are willing to just follow him off the cliff, but not any more than 30%. So yeah, obviously we're just going to have a raging virus getting worse and worse until January, and we get rid of Trump because he just refuses to do anything about it.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kaitlyn.
I was going to say, I was really upset when they were talking about sacrificing our weak and our grandmothers for the economy.
And the teachers. The teachers got my
but now they want to sacrifice the teachers and 0.02 something percent of children, or roughly equivalent of 14,000 children, for the economy. And I'm just like, wait, no, that's not a good idea.
No,
I mean, if the only thing that matters is Trump being popular and human life means nothing, which is where he is. He's just a psychopath. He doesn't understand that people are real. They're just objects to adore him. But what's surprising is all Republicans go along with it.
Yeah. This is just, it's something else. And I think that, I just hope that we start to do, you know, we see it's possible to reverse some of these bad decisions before they get enacted. And I hope to see that happening more frequently as we move along. I had read something last week, and I, you know, statistics are fallible at best, but what I had read was that it was something like over 80% of computer science grad students in the U.S. are foreign students. And if you think about the far-reaching ramifications of doing something this dumb, you are really going to limit your country's, you know, bleeding edge technological innovations by doing stuff like this, medical innovations, you know, the list goes on and on. So,
yeah, I'm glad they stopped it, and I'm surprised at how quickly they slapped it down. Now we got
the question: why don't we slap other stupid decisions down like this? If it's possible, you know, can we apply this elsewhere?
Well, a year ago, it wouldn't have been so quick because Trump was all powerful. Now he is collapsing. He's already planning to lose. That's why he's gutting the legal system in New York, so he won't have to face the prosecution once he's not protected by office. And everybody knows he's going down. Everyone I'm reading, all the Republicans know he's going down, and therefore they aren't following him anymore. They're dragging their feet. They're protesting. So it used to be you have to obey him because they're terrified of his Twitter feed. Now they don't really have to obey him so much. And he reversed himself twice. He canceled his South Carolina rally and pretended there was a bad weather when there totally was no bad weather, because they found out they couldn't get any people to show up. It was going to be worse than Tulsa. It was going to be an empty stadium. So they made up a lie and canceled it. So he's really bleeding badly. He's going to lose in a landslide from the looks of things, and he knows it, and all the supporters around him know it. So nobody really cares what he thinks the way they used to. Anyway, SAP Recon.
Yes, the SAP. Yes, yeah, the SAP Recon vulnerability has a rated CVSS 10 out of 10.
And what is SAP Recon?
Remotely exploitable code on NetWeaver.
Well, sure, but I mean, it's a product of some kind that you would install for some reason. What does it do?
I don't actually know what the SAP device does.
Yeah. SAP Application Solution Manager, Application Lifestyle Manager.
This is the sort of product that's marketed entirely to IT people, and then their bosses approve it because they're Dilbert's bosses. And
that's just what I was thinking. It looks like just a bunch of buzzwords. It's an application lifecycle manager.
Probably nothing. Yeah.
All of SAP's products.
It's the process integration module. Like, what does it do?
Right.
It's landscape management. Somehow I think that's not, you know.
This is a megacorp that serves megacorps.
Holy cow, look at this stuff.
Yeah.
Complete
all
integration ecosystem crapware.
I gave my poor instant response students last semester before the job of installing one of these things and making it go, and it was really painful.
I think what NetWeaver is a horrendous website generation tool.
And it kind of does look like that.
You know, this sounds like the stupid thing we use they make us use at the college called AccuWeather or some stupid thing, where you're supposedly to plan your new courses, and it just means endless forms that don't work and stupid pages of crap.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it kind of like it's taking some pages out of Splunk and just everything together into a horrible thing that doesn't taste good at all.
Well, but I understand why this happens. For huge enterprises, they need to have all these reports of what everybody's doing. So they want everybody to be using your enterprise class system to keep track of everything, customers and suppliers and everything. And
they sell it to them too, like, oh, you'll get a much better deal if you get all of these services from us instead of, having one vendor here, one vendor there, vendors that actually might specialize in the one thing they're selling you. Oh, that's going to cost you more and be a lot more administrative overhead than if you take our mega solutions package.
Yeah, for us, it's Banner and Curricunet. Those are the two commercial products to run everything at our college. And
you guys haven't moved to Illumin?
We have not moved to Illumin.
Mine did, and that was a pain.
But I understand why they exist. I actually wrote a version of this like 25 years ago in MS-DOS-based database so we could summarize our cases at the legal firm. You do need to have some way of getting a query like how many active cases are there, how many customer contacts did we make this month, how many things are being forgotten and dropped off. You do want to get that data, and that's what makes you move to some giant structure like this so that everything at your company is all entered into one system so you can do a query like, do we need to hire more staff or open up a new location or something? We can get a measure about how we're doing. So, but everybody hates it at the company because it all means you have to basically fill out a tax form for everything you do in some broken system. Anyway, and then you get hacked through it, which is the fun part. But anyway. So target an algorithmic pay model. I was trying to understand this. Right. What is the algorithmic pay model?
So the way a lot of these gigs work, of course, is you have you have a bunch of people and you say, for this ride, you'll get paid such and such amount of money. If you like Uber, right? I think Uber's a good example of how this would work. So If you're riding in a, say, if you're doing Uber in a high traffic area where there's a high amount of demand, you're going to get paid more, despite the fact that you're doing the same work as you would do if it was a low demand time frame.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of these kind of gig workers or gig platforms are switching to these algorithmic models, which adjust the pay based on various parameters. And of course, these adjustments to pay are going to work in the company's favor. And this is something I'm keeping an eye on, is the whole gig economy, because it comes across to me as a way of exploiting workers, where you can have this large workforce and just not pay them what they're actually worth.
Right.
And a lot. And so what's going on here is that the people who are working with Target's app are protesting, essentially, or are literally protesting with the strike against this move to further delegitimize and devalue the work that they're doing.
Yeah, another one I heard about is now everyone's having you work at home. They're going to watch, and if you move to like Montana, they're going to cut your pay since the cost of living is less. You clearly don't need so much money anymore. It kind of makes sense, but it kind of sounds rapacious and cruel. It's an interesting issue.
If you are working, so I love the idea that you can, if you need a job, that you can just go to Uber and be like, I have a car, let me do your thing, and you can do that. I think that's great. The problem is that if you're doing it full time, you need to be paid like a full-time employee. Yes. And that's where this all breaks down.
It's this disruptive new thing, which is messed up and not really fitting in too well in the economy. Well, and one of the many problems is everyone gets their health care through their work in America. So having some kind of messed up work that doesn't count is a much bigger problem than you might imagine.
It is, but I mean, this has been going on for a long time in many different ways. Adjunct college professors is a good example of that.
Slave class is what you call it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that this is just finding new ways to exploit and capitalize on.
That seems to be the short-term version of it. Anyway, one good thing about this current madness we've had in government is the backlash might bring us some stuff like socialized medicine and fair wages. And I would like to see unions come back. There's a bunch of things to balance the rapaciousness of employers that have vanished and need to come back, like OSHA, for example.
I think you mentioned one of the biggest things, Sam, which is, how messed up it is that our healthcare is tied to our jobs here.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a problem for in so many contexts.
When we have someone rational in government again, if that happens, they will understand that having a huge portion of our culture that is like minorities, illegal immigrants that we treat like dirt and make them live in crowded places and work in unsafe conditions creates health problems, which then spread to everybody else. So it's not okay to have a class of downtrodden, oppressed slaves that we treat like dirt and imagine we can get away with it. That would be awesome if we could reach that decision.
It's also totally insane with our system that if you get fired or lose your job, your entire family loses